Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I'm doing a spotlight on Mythic Odysseys of Theros. This is a new 5th edition D&D setting that released yesterday. We're taking a look at the D&D Beyond digital interface version here, but I'll talk through it all. I'll show you what's what, and hopefully at the end of it all, you're a bit better informed as to whether or not this might be something that's a good fit for you and your gaming group. Let's jump into it. First things first, really cool cover art. I like it. I'm a big fan. It screams to us as to sort of what this is. If this is all you saw, it kind of has that Clash of the Titans feel. This is a world that is inspired by Greek mythology, and it is similar to Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica in that it is a world that was created for Magic the Gathering, I think somewhere in around 2013. So let's confirm that. A quick welcome to Theros, the caprice of the gods, the destiny of heroes, great journeys into monster-infested wilds, and mythic odysseys to the edge of the world and back. These elements of adventure fill the realms of Theros, a new setting for your D&D campaign. The roots of Theros lie in the myths of ancient Greece, tales dominated by gods, monsters, and heroes. This world was created as a setting for Magic, explored in card sets beginning in 2013. And basically what they did is, this shows how you can take inspiration from real-world mythology and adapt it into something for fantasy adventures. So let's jump into this. The introduction section does a really good job of giving you kind of a flowchart overview. Chapter 1 is going to talk about the heroes. What are your races? What can you play? Chapter 2 is the gods of Theros. That's a big part. If you're inspired by Greek mythology, then the gods definitely play a big role in the lives and the social atmosphere and the civilizations of those within it. So the god section is going to be a big one. Chapter 3 is kind of like your gazetteer, basically walking you through the world, talking about that a little bit. Chapter 4 is how you can build some adventures. As a dungeon master, here's all the different plot hooks, seeds of inspiration to make something cool to bring to your table. Chapter 5 is going to talk about a couple of treasures, some new items and things like this. And Chapter 6 is kind of your bestiary. Let's take a look at character creation. So, first thing you want to do is you want to make a determining factor decision, whatever you want to call it, on what's my heroic drive? Why do I go out there as my character and do heroic, big, badass things? So you need to establish that. It offers a few little tips and tricks and suggestions. But more importantly, you're going to want to know, what the hell can I play in this world? What makes it different? There's already Eberron, there's Wildmount, there's Ravnica, there's already been Forgotten Realms. There's a bunch of third-party things. I did a recent spotlight on Dragongrin. There's a lot of worlds out there. Wildmount. There's a lot of worlds out there. What makes this one so different? So here's a few little things. One is called Supernatural Gifts. This is kind of like a feat. It's a little more elaborate, a little more complex, I think a lot cooler. Obviously has a lot more lore and detail that attaches it to Theros and makes it feel like this mythological world. But as far as the buttons, what I like to call it, the moving parts, the things that affect your character sheet. A character in Theros begins with one supernatural gift chosen from this section. Work with your DM to decide where that gift came from. Maybe you were born with it. The god that you choose to follow may have given it to you as some sort of a permanent blessing. Maybe, and very interestingly, it can provide some seeds of inspiration and fuel, is maybe a god different than the one that you follow gave you this supernatural gift. Whatever, wherever you get it from, think of you starting the game with this level 1 feat. It also does recommend in this little box here that if you want to, you can get a feat from the player's handbook instead. But I think the supernatural gifts are a lot cooler. I won't go over all of them. I'll just show you one real quick. Anvil Rot. You kind of become like this construct. And you can see they don't all attach to a god, but a lot of them do. You were forged in the fires of Perforos' forge. Your appearance bears a metallic sheen and visible joints. I like that because it immediately identifies you aesthetically, visually, as, hey, you're someone that has a supernatural gift because you look different. What does it do? It gives you constructed resilience. You have an advantage on saves versus being poisoned, and you have resistance to poison damage. You don't need to eat, drink, and breathe. You're immune to disease. You don't need to sleep, and magic can't put you to sleep. Also, you have this thing called Sentry Rest. Sounds very robotic, mechanical, right? When you take a long rest, you have to spend at least 6 hours in an inactive, motionless state rather than sleeping. And it has a few little charts or a chart of some characteristics about, where it came from maybe, or just some details about it. and it follows that same treatment for all 9 of them. They're really neat, they're really cool, and they start to attach your character to the world of Theros, but they also just give you these things that feel like you have almost this, similar to like what the marks of Eberron did. You just have this thing about you, this supernatural gift that is represented through the gods. Okay, so very, very cool. Races. Here's where there's the biggest divergence. One thing I always talk about is with content, is there a lot of plug and play here? And there's a lot of new things. There's new magic items, there's new artifacts, there's new monsters. There's a lot of lore that you can latch onto and maybe use the inspiration for your other worlds, even if you're not going to run in this. But also, if I wanted to run this world, why should I play it versus Forgotten Realms, versus Ravnica, versus whatever's already out there? Here's some distinguishing characteristics. Besides those supernatural gifts, aside from humans, the races in the player's handbook are unknown on Theros, unless they're visiting from other worlds. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. It's your game. But humans are similar to those found in other D&D worlds, so humans are humans. Adaptable, ambitious, and diverse. But other than that, when your players are making characters, they're options. What is running around on your table as PCs, the NPCs. Notice, when that's all you have from the player's handbook, there's no dwarves, there's no elves, no dragonborn, no half-elves, no half-orcs, no gnomes, no goblins, things from Volo's guide, no halflings, no half-orcs, Goliaths, tieflings. There's a lot gone. Okay? You really have, 6 races? That's it. So you have humans, you have centaurs, satyrs, and tritons. All 3 of those are given, of course, a bunch of lore and details attaching them to this world. But tritons function mechanically, the stats and traits and stuff, exactly like they do in Volo's Guide. Minotaurs and centaurs function exactly as those 2 races do in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. The new ones are Leonin, which are these lion-like hunters. If you know anything about Magic the Gathering, I think it's a Johnny. There's some other Magic cards. You'll see these kind of lion-like looking. They're not tabaxi at all, they're not just cat people. But you have new races in the Leonin and Satyrs. Leonin, there they are. Look kind of very tabaxi-ish to a certain extent, but different. They're generally lawful good. Con goes up by 2, strength by 1. You have a 35-foot movement speed, dark vision. You basically have natural weapons through claws. You get to pick one of these skills to be proficient in, and you have a roar that frightens people if they fail a save. Satyrs. Uh-oh, I broke it. Charisma goes up by 2. Dex goes up by 1. Movement of 35 as well. You are Fey, you're not humanoid. You can hit people with your head and horns, basically an unarmed strike. You have magic resistance, that's a big one. You have advantage on saves versus spells and other magical effects. That's a huge ability to have just as part of a race. You can jump real high, and kind of, Mr. Tumnus from Narnia. You have proficiency in performance and persuasion skills, playing your musical instrument of choice. It doesn't have to be magical. But there's your new races. So 2 new races, 6 total. I think the biggest sort of glaring thing, not a weakness, but just the glaring obvious change and difference is the amount of things that are typically available are not here. So that is a good thing, because when we have 6 D&D settings out there, 4 settings in the last 2 years, I need to know what's different. Subclass options, you have 2 new ones. Bards can now play as the College of Eloquence. Kind of, you're more elegantly speaking your words, therefore it kind of changes the way you use your Bardic Inspiration and such. You can use Bardic Inspiration to reduce someone's saving throw. Something along the lines, I think this one, Unfailing Inspiration. When a Bardic Inspiration is used, but yet that result didn't help and they still failed the roll, they don't spend it. They get to keep it instead. And then you have one Infectious Inspiration, which is a big one. When a Bardic Inspiration is used, you can kind of use your reaction to give a Bardic Inspiration to someone else, but it doesn't count towards your Bardic Inspiration uses. So that's a big deal. And then Paladins have a new oath, the Oath of Glory. A lot of this latches onto kind of the very inspired by Athens, Greek mythology aspect, where there's very athletic, indicated right here. At 3rd level, as a bonus action, you use Channel Divinity, and for the next 10 minutes, you have advantage on Strength Athletics and Dexterity Acrobatics. So you become, a ninja warrior guy. You have Inspiring Smite. It lets you give, temporary hit points to people by using Channel Divinity. Your base walking speed increases by 10 feet. You're just faster. Okay? And when allies are starting their turn within 5 feet of you, for the remainder of that turn, or until the end of that turn, their speed goes up by 10 feet as well. And as you go up into real high level, that aura increases. So that movement thing's kind of a big deal. You can manipulate armor class whenever someone was about to be hit. You can kind of use... What do? You just use your reaction, and you give them more AC equal to your charisma modifier. And then you have this crazy-ass thing, but it's level 20. As a bonus action, you gain all of these for a minute. Advantage on all charisma checks. On each of your turns, if you miss with a weapon attack, you basically say, nah, I didn't miss, I hit. And then if you fail a saving throw, you can use your reaction to re-roll it. So you can't use that again until you finish a long rest, or you can expend a 5th level spell slot to refresh it. So that's cool. The new background. It does a lot of good, and offers some little details on, here's just some ways, and it did that earlier in sort of the introduction, of here's some ways of thinking through some pre-existing background stuff in the player's handbook, but how you might be able to weave like an NPC or a key person in your life that shaped your background, change it to a god from this world instead. So that way you kind of almost create that Kratos effect. You now have hate for that god, and that's why you were, you changed your life into becoming some heroic, that type of thing. If you're looking for new, you get one. You get the athlete with the full treatment. Once again, kind of feels like, look at this. You get to pick a favorite event: marathon, long distance running, wrestling, boxing. Very athlete, Athens, again, inspired by that. So there it is. There's your sort of new options. 2 new subclasses, 2 new races. A lot of races are gone, and you have a new background called the athlete. Chapter 3 is kind of what I believe is the meat and potatoes of this. It's a lot of lore. One thing in this book overall, it doesn't do a lot of hand-holding. It doesn't say, hey, here's how you play, here's what you do. It just gives you a lot to read on. But I think in that, it just provides these seeds of inspiration. Therefore, what that means is I can take some of the stuff here and bring it into my own worlds and use some of it. If nothing else, when I'm creating my own content, my own pantheon, in my own world, let's say, or even the existing pantheon of my world, I can really flesh it out to the level they have here, because I think they've done a really, really good job with the gods here, as they should. When you're inspired by Greek mythology, the gods shape the very course of events that happen, so there needs to be a lot of detail there. The one big moving part that is going to be noticed when you read through the god section is something called piety. So it's kind of a new currency. If you know Ravnica, it's like renown. This is a new thing you put on your sheet. You basically pick a god that you choose to worship at the beginning of character creation, so first level, and your piety score related to that god is 1. And as you do things in the game, basically great deeds, something that's a significant goal that was important to your god, one of its domains, one of its tenets, whatever you want to call it, such as completing an adventure in that god's name or whatever, you increase your piety by 1. And then there's these thresholds. When you reach 3, 10, 25, and 50, you get benefits associated with that god. They're all different depending on which god. So that's something that you track. The cool part for like lore or I should say adventure hooks for the DM and for players alike is you can both increase piety and lose piety. You only have piety with one god. So you can change gods in this. Maybe a god hates you now and he doesn't want you following him. Or you do something to wrong that god. If you change gods, you basically lose all the piety benefits you had. You lose the piety with that god, and you reset back to 1 with your new god. So you have piety with that one god. And then as you go through it, when you play the game, it just shows a lot of interaction between your characters and the gods and things like this. So like Athreos, for example. And the way that these are all offered for all these gods is just really well done. It gives you a cool symbol. It reminds you that through the constellation design that the gods are sort of more present here. They're here. And you can see them up in the stars. Right here very quickly. The gods of Theros are far more active than the deities of most D&D worlds. But that doesn't mean they're ordinary creatures. They're not mortals. And they can't really be fought. They're not statted here. So you could go full Kratos, and like use a god as like a main campaign villain. And, kind of just ruining the god's followers to a level and his influence on the world to a level that he kind of gets weakened to the point where maybe one of the other gods intervene and take him out. In that regard, I think it's as it should be. I think that's a really good touch because it shows you that the gods are above you and they are gods, but you don't have that, it happened with Forgotten Realms a lot where you have this umbrella of like powerful NPCs and you feel like the video game thing where I just can't wait till we level up and do all the cool stuff because it's all the high level NPCs and the powerful dragons and all the other elite things in the world that make us feel so minuscule. They're doing all the cool world changing stuff. We're just doing some menial, trivial things. So that's something that they could have gone in the wrong direction with when you're dealing with a world that has sort of so much interaction and influence with gods, where the gods can almost take center stage instead of the PCs. And they've done a good job where you can be kind of the Leonin, the lion guys, and basically say, I don't revere the gods, the hell with them. Or you can be like, I don't want to follow you anymore, or I'm losing piety with you, or I'm trying to bring about your downfall. So you still have a lot of influence in the world. Really nice touch with that. As I said, you know the piety stuff, and then each god just has this really cool full section on detail, lore, what they're about, what their relationships are, what is it like to worship them. If you're kind of one of their champions, it's not a blank template that, you know, only a certain class or race can be a Pharaoh's champion. It just shows you, typically, you're playing this type of a character if you're sort of representing as sort of her. The way I see a champion in this is just like the other mortals in the world that follow the gods. The mortals that follow the gods that happen to be player characters, they're sort of the champions of those gods. And then, here it is. What happens when your piety increases with Ifara to these different levels, 3, 10, 25, and 50? At 50, you generally will always increase a single stat of your choice. Not of your choice, but the options that are there by 2. So you want to increase piety. And then here's some really good seeds. You've got these bullet points that say, hey, here's some things that when your player asks, I really want to earn some more piety with this god. That's important to me. What are the sort of things I can do? Well, based on what she believes in and what her faith is like, if you defend a city from a major threat, that's seen as a good thing in her eyes. You'll get 1 piety from that. If you create a masterwork, such as a building or a poem, that's seen as a good thing. But also, within her piety charts, but also, if you betray one's trust to commit acts of corruption or tyranny, clearly this sounds like a very good god, you'll lose piety with her. But these might be little seeds and hooks. The losing piety thing, remember I said you can only have piety, a currency with one god, but these things provide seeds that maybe the DM can use for ways that you can start angering another god if you want to bring them about as some sort of like a main villain or something. So each god gives you, there's 15 of them, and they give the full treatment of lore, detail, story, the little charts that attach them to the character with piety and things like this, how you earn with them, how you lose with them, how you gain favor. Really, really good section. Next is Gods and Mortals, the realms, basically the world itself. You get a simple map, nothing too crazy here. It's pretty sparse, but it's really short. It says that it's only like 200 miles apart. However, it does have this little blurb on, down here when you're exploring that basically think of everything, the borders, the location, the distance between one city and another as sort of more of suggested. They can vary because the gods muck about with this stuff, right? It mentions even the Dakra Isles. The gods kind of like puzzle pieces just move those islands around. So one time you sail there, you might get to shore within 1 day. But then the next time, the exact same path, it takes you 6 days. And you're like, what the hell? Things are always constantly changing. It kind of has that otherworldly effect. This is on the mortal realm, though. It's still on the material plane. But that's kind of how it's laid out. You've got these 3 main sort of kingdoms, nations, if you will. Meletis is inspired by Athens. Akros is like Sparta. And Ceteza is like Themyscira, right? Amazon City from DC Comics, Wonder Woman. So obviously there's a very heavy influence of they almost worship and heavily protect children, and women are of higher status than men, so to speak, or they allow men there, but once you reach age 14 in Ceteza, they expect you to go about and find your place within the world type of thing. So you've got these 3 different interesting places. Scophos is a city of minotaurs, so it's really cool to see not only the emission of all those races from when I talked about character creation, you've also got these places where, even though the main 3 are sort of very heavily human populated, you have a minotaur city here. You have kind of zombie areas down here, and you've got just these other places. You have entire wildlands that are owned and dominated by centaur tribes and clans. So it feels very mythological, Greek mythology in that world. You know what I mean? Centaurs and cyclops and things of that nature. So the world itself is really neat. It goes over all of the details there. It's not hand-holding anything. It's not telling you run this, run that. It's more of these paragraphs within these different headings that show you the way a world is run, who runs it, the monarchy, or the cities, I should say. What are the names of the medieval or the military forces? What are they called? Who's who in the world? Really good artwork, really cool pictures. This just screams to me and tells me, this informs to me a lot about Meletis and also what sort of gameplay might I have within this place. It also offers you the outside areas, outside of the cities. It gives you some blurbs and some blitz on, like I said, the Realms of the Return, which is kind of zombie-ish area. People that have left the underworld and they kind of have forsaken their identity, and now they sort of roam as zombies. But we're not just talking about they're just creatures that you pull out of the monster manual. No, they have entire realms and regions that they control, just like the Minotaurs have an entire city that they are, responsible for. And then you have two other realms that you can play in. There's not a lot on them. Nyx, which is kind of that space starry place where the gods are from. And then you have the underworld if you want to start running some gameplay within those regions. Okay, but the big bulk of it is the mortal realm. Those three main cities. Think of like Athens, Sparta, and Themyscira. Next chapter, creating adventures. A wealth of detail here. Tons and tons of stuff if you want to create adventures based on the gods. How to use the god as a villain. How to use the god if you're doing work for him. What are the types of things that they'd want done? When I go to any one of these gods, Erebos, here's some adventure goals. I can simply roll on a d6 or just pick something and say, protect those who attend the funeral of a village elder in the hills near Akros, where minotaurs have disrupted recent burials. That's some storyline and some campaign stuff that my players can do, but also a follower of Erebos, a champion of Erebos, will probably gain some piety as a result of doing that. But on the flip side, if you want to go against Erebos, let's stop. Let's destroy and ruin the funeral that's about to happen. Those type of things, right? And every god has that. Here's some villains, the people that might not like Erebos, right? And these are actual encounters. Like I can mouse over and get some monsters now. Here's literally monsters that are associated with Erebos. There's something in this called omens, basically signs of the gods. Maybe you see a bunch of nightmares one day, and all of a sudden you're kind of thinking, wait a minute, Erebos is nearby. What's going on? If there's a PC in your group that follows Erebos, he's going to want to figure out what the deal is with these nightmares, because these are monsters that are attached to this god, and it does that for every one of them. So there's just a lot of seeds and lore that you can use to create some adventures with the gods. If you don't want to use the gods as the core of your adventure, you can do some nautical stuff. And it keeps it loose, offering charts and things that you can springboard off of, but also something that I can easily take into by simply looking at this picture and say, you know what, we're going to run into a little bit of Ghosts of Saltmarsh now and use some of the stuff in there. So it definitely has a lot of plug and play that you can bring into other worlds. You can get into underworld adventures. It has a few seeds here that you can use if you want to start running players through some content that happens in the underworld. Look at this picture. As a DM, for me, I can sit on this for 2 minutes and it screams to me a bunch of stuff. That mask, if you're assigned to protect her and make sure that mask is never taken, that might be something that's looked at highly by Atheros, because you don't want to mess with the things that are a part of the rites of passage from living to dead. But maybe you want to ruin that. You want to steal this thing. Who is that? Who died? Is that a significant person? She looks powerful. She looks like she's in that city of Athens, that Athens-inspired place. There's a lot that can go off of just that. So you can definitely journey into the underworld as well. And then there is something called No Silent Secret. It's a full adventure for 4 to 6 level 1 characters. They'll get to level 2 before it's all said and done. And it has the full treatment of, maps and places you can go and read this to your players and so on. So if you want to just jump them into it, there's an adventure here. The last 2 sections, we look at treasures. There are 8 new magic items. The Flying Chariot, Helm of the Gods, Molten Bronze Skin, a new potion, a Pyxis, which is a legendary thing that basically you touch this wooden vessel for 1 minute, you gain the benefits of a short rest. But it has a little section on curses, and it has all this pandemonium that can be caused by using it, and an awesome picture to boot. So there's definitely entertaining gameplay here. So 8 new items and 5 new artifacts. The Hammer of Perforos, +3 Warhammer, 3d10 fire damage. If you happen to be a worshipper of Perforos, when you reach certain piety, you start unlocking minor and major beneficial properties to it. I mean, listen to this. To destroy the hammer, it must be taken to the realm of Tizerus in the underworld. There it must be coated in clay from the mire of punishment. The heat of the hammer hardens the clay, which fuses to it after 1 month. Once fully hardened, the clay-covered hammer must be swallowed and digested by a kraken. That's an entire story arc, that can take you through a whole campaign. Just, hey guys, this whole game, you heard about, you come upon the hammer of Perforos, we need to destroy it. Okay? That sounds like something we may have all read or watched, right? The destruction of an item being the entire catalyst for an entire adventure. So there's a lot there, 5 new ones. You get a new trident, a bow. These are all artifacts, a spear, and a whip. And then finally, you've got friends and foes. So you can give like these new traits that we roll on a d6. You give magic resistance, and it basically creates like a Nyx-born orc, or the normal monsters in the monster manual, but you say they were born from the same place where the gods were born. And it gives you these new traits, which make them feel different. And then also, any part of their body that isn't lit by direct light shows the starry gleam of Nyx, so they look different. They would resemble ordinary mortal creatures until you see them outside of the light. So there's ways of sort of taking the currently existing stuff in monster books, Volos and Monster Manual and Tome of Foes and stuff like this, and twisting it a little bit to make it fit within the lore and the story that makes sense for Theros. It takes a lot of your classic monsters, Greek mythology once again. Basilisks on Theros have only 4 legs, but they're statistically identical to those in the Monster Manual. Catoblepus, here's a bunch of lore and details as to how they fit within the world, but look to Volos for their stats. But when you get into like Medusa, the Medusa of Theros differ from those in the Monster Manual. They have long serpentine bodies in place of legs. Sounds like Clash of the Titans, right? A Medusa uses the stat block from the Monster Manual, but it has these additional altered actions and benefits. So it's changed. So there you're taking things that are changed or changing them to fit them within the lore, and sometimes it does give you more. Beyond that, though, I ran this book. I have the entire D&D Beyond database interface, all the official books. I filtered the monster tab by this book only, and something like 53 new monsters popped up. So there's 50 plus monsters, brand new, only to this book that you'll find here. And they run the full treatment. Here's these new, the anvil rots, like these new construct things. You can get this new anvil rot raptor familiar. When you get into like archons and things like this, beautiful artwork. Full stat blocks, just tons and tons of new stuff. Cerberus, and then the underworld version of Cerberus. And finally, you've got these 3 sort of epic. Arasta, the Endless Web. Some lore. CR21 full stat block. Layer actions, regional effects. What's her effect being near this swamp? Using her as a mythic encounter. High level campaign ending type stuff. You have her. You have Hythonia the Cruel. And what better way to finish the whole book and this video than to talk about a CR26 Kraken. So there it is. There's a lot of new stuff. A bunch of races gone, so it feels different. 2 new races in the Satyr and the Leonin. You've got that new background, the Athlete. You have 2 new subclasses, one for the College of Bards, and then one for Paladin Oaths. You've got a bunch of lore and really good bits with using that piety chart and the gods and the way they interact with the world and so on. You have 50 new creatures, some new places, some new gameplay, if this is your thing. If you really like Greek mythology, there's a lot here. If you want inspiration, there's a lot here. The thing I like about this is I would have gone to, and I have gone to Greek mythology anyway for D&D inspiration. I just love the treatment. It feels fantastical and larger than life, right? So now you can attach it even more so, because now you can really pull some actual 5e bits. So there's a lot of good bits here. This was like $27 or something like that on D&D Beyond. So check it out if you're interested. Hopefully that helped get you off the fence. And at least, if nothing else, kind of highlighted to you what's within this new book. I forget what it's called. Mythic Odysseys of Theros. That's all I have. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care.